Welcome to this live Q&A call. It's September the 5th, 2019. And before we start, there are a couple of house rules here. So to ask a question, you just write in the chat, I have a question, and we'll get you unmuted. And so everybody can get the needed help. There's a 10-minute threshold for each question every time you get picked. And yeah, let's just get started. So if you have a question, just write in the chat and I will just get you unmuted in that order. Let's see the chat here. Yeah. So if you have a question, just type I have a question and I will get you unmuted. Yeah. Kevin, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little more about where you organize the, like normally how I've organized is like by components, directives, pipes, but then you talked about doing it by, more
feature.
functionality, and I get, but at the same point, so if you could talk a little more about that.
Yeah, actually, yeah. And actually, there's actually both are true. It's just how you do it. So let me just write it here up so you can see it. So let's just do a box of the top level. So inside of the source app folder, you have the different feature folders here. So the different feature folders, what I'm saying that you shouldn't have, for example, if you go to the app folder, and then you have like components here, and then you just have all your components that is not grouped after the features, right? So if you did this, then you would have bad cohesion. You just have a lot of functional grouping. And then I did the metaphor of, imagine you go into IKEA and you want to collect the table, and then you go to the area of the warehouse where they have all the table legs. You go to the area of the warehouse where they have all like the screws and where they have all like the table board. So you'll just go around in all the warehouse to just collect. You just want one feature, just want one table. But so what I recommend here is, for example, let's say we have something that here it's related to the login page, for example. So you have a login page here. But what you can do inside of here, what I then think is probably what you're thinking about. Inside of here, it's okay to have then for example, components inside of here. I see this a lot. Then inside of here there are components, and then there are directives, for example, and pipes. Is this what you talked about?
Yeah, kind of like in a shared library type of thing,
Yeah, I would still have this one in front of it. I would still have this feature grouping, because that would keep the cohesion good, and this will keep things separately. So imagine going to IKEA here, you want to pick up the table, and then there's the different parts split up here, but you're still in one location. You're not bouncing around in the whole repository, which is going to make development slow and going to make it hard to see what belongs together. So we want this to be good. We got good cohesion here. And then we can have this. So this structure, I probably should have been more explicit about it in the lessons. So what actually is the feature. This is the feature folder. And inside of this, you can have this functional folder. I see this a lot, and I think that's fair. But the normal beginner mistake is to have this one, because this is going to be a mess. You see, as this grows, you're going to have hundreds of components. They're not related together. You're just going to have one big mess. And also, one thing I talked about, the human mind is not really good at anything above 7 items at one abstraction level. So for each level of abstraction, we want to at most have 7 items. So that also means here that this could work, this way of doing it, but imagine that this is a huge feature and we start having like hundreds of components inside of here. That means probably instead of this, we should split it down so we have a sub-feature folder also. So we could have something like, so we have this feature here, like in, and then it could be like, remember forgot password. And then there's a page for that, and then there might be a service, there might be a component for that, for showing that. And then inside of that, there might be the components folder and such. So you can add this when you start exceeding like the 7 items for each abstraction level, because that's when humans get really bad at working with it. Yeah. So you can add these kind of feature folders, but if you don't, you should below 7 items on each folder, then you could just do this. So that's what I meant with the feature folders. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we were talking the same thing. Just I understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
All right. Great. Yes. Did that answer your question?
It did. Yes.
Awesome. And now we have Deepak, who has a question, and I'll get him unmuted. Just try again. For some reason, I can't get him unmuted. Let's see. I can unmute Kevin, but I can't get him. Maybe are you sure you have a microphone connected, Deepak?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, now it's working. Oh, great.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, we have a project which is in AngularJS, and sometime we want to migrate to Angular 8, means upgraded version of the Angular. So I would like to get some suggestions from your side as a best practice that can help us to easily move the code from AngularJS to.
Have you looked at ng upgrade? Have you looked at this one?
No, not too much.
Okay. I recommend just checking that out. That's the easiest way to upgrade. One transition you might be doing here is in AngularJS, you're probably doing a lot of Webpack, either Webpack or manual gulp task to get everything bundled and such. And here you'll make the transition to Angular CLI, which also is what I recommend because it's the most streamlined and the easiest way to do the build and all the build tasks related to Angular. So if you do this will be the easy. Just follow this manual here and just let me know if anything gets stuck anyway. If you haven't done anything too fancy in your AngularJS configuration, this should be fairly easy and should be the easiest way to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just post a link so you can go check that out. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes, I will.
All right.
I will check it out.
Good. And then we have Amal, and I'll just get you unmuted, Amal. Yeah, you're now unmuted. And yes, Amal, you are unmuted.
Yep. Thank you, Christian. My first, I completed all the videos in the first lesson, so 4 videos.
Yeah.
The first week. I haven't actually started on the assignments for 3rd and 4th video, but I have few questions before that. Yeah. It's when we tag the live apps, right? Either utils or UI or even services like that. So it is a good way to segregate the things, that I agree. But in the bigger project, do we, or let's say in bigger project, code wise or even the number of resources who are working on that project, do we put the too many restrictions over there? Will it be the case that then while designing your components or even utilities, you are putting too many restrictions on the coding
regarding using the NX tags and lint?
Yes, NX tags.
I can just show everything here. So we have this, I set up this demo mono repo here. No, I think it's just making it easier, because when we start out, what I recommend is that you just have one library for each of you have one library for your feature libraries, you have one library for your app libraries, and then you just have one for your, for example, shared UI, your shared data access, and shared utils. So it's a pretty simple setup to begin with. And it's just all enforced like this, and it is necessary to have this in place. Otherwise you could start doing messy stuff with by not having the dependencies in check. So I don't think it really should hold you back. Have you found any problems with this since you're asking?
No, actually I found it rather very good. The reason is we anyway do this thing by putting some of the guidelines, either coding wise while reviewing or like that. Now as we are doing this by like technical wise, right, or by as we put it, by automating the things, I just wonder whether that will create like any restrictive environment.
It will only restrict you from doing the wrong thing, so that's a good thing. All right.
Yeah. So
you have.
Yeah. Thank you. So next is actually like in third slide, third video, I read that once you put the things in index file, right, the NX will only publish the public APIs. Right.
Yeah. It's not even so. NX is just working on top of Angular CLI. So what NX? So from Angular CLI, you can have this mono repo structure just from Angular CLI, where you have libs and apps. What NX is enabling, it's extending the schematics, so you can have a library inside of a library.
Okay.
But a lot of the stuff is actually, and then it has some more built. If you go into the Angular JSON, you can see it adds a lot of extra and new. Not this one, because this is pretty much just as close as Angular CLI as possible. But if you can have like React, you can have React apps inside of here, and Node apps, which is extra builders that NX is providing. But a lot of the stuff is actually just pure Angular CLI. So for example, and then they have these custom TSLint rules. One of them that is preventing you from accessing anything else from the index file from a library, because we want clear encapsulation in the libraries. So we don't access some library internal from another place, and we can have a clear facade. So what I do, for example, here you see in for example, this to-do list here. So yeah, I use this as you can say sandbox, you can say facade. It's almost the same thing. Call it facade if that is the less confusing thing for your team, because sandbox is pretty much and can be a pretty overloaded term for some teams. So use it wisely. But yeah, technically this is a sandbox because it also contains some business logic. As you can see, it's not just pure delegating to the lower level stuff. So yeah, what I'm doing here is I'm just having this here, and then in the index file, I'm just making sure that you can only access this one, and then the module, of course. Because by doing this, it's impossible to do the wrong thing. That is to go in and access effects and access reducers and stuff from, for example, from the app. Because we want the app always to use this one here. Because later, if you want to change the state management from NGIX to Akita, or we want to change it to just pure basic subjects, behavior subjects, for example, if you just want a simple setup, we can easily do that because it's all behind the facade here. That is just, we can just change stuff here, and we don't need to go in the app and change everything. So this facade will always stay the same, because facade uses the domain language, so it's easy to understand from the apps here. So that's why I recommend this architecture here, and it will save you from a lot of headache here. Just having this in place, and resources, that's where all your it can be HTTP calls and WebSockets, just put them in here, and then you just use the sandbox to do all the delegation here. So here you can see we do store dispatches, we get the selectors, so we just make sure this just is something that is not depending on any specific technology, but it's just normal normal Angular stuff. And then we only expose the sandbox using the index file. Because if you try to import this one, we will get a lint error. But then in this novel lint rules, they'll make sure we get an error. That's one of the things we get out of the box from Navel.
Yeah, got it now.
All right.
Yep. Like that's, I was actually a little bit confused with the public APIs that we use, because like typically we develop the services in Java or in any of the backend, and then we publish those services. So that's why I just got confused. But yeah, got it cleared now.
All right, great.
Yeah, like there's one more question, Christian. So like in one of the videos you mentioned that we divide our businesses in the sandbox services, okay, or like component services. So like typically how we use this, we have developed the services, I mean, let's say abc.service.ts, where we have the functions which actually calls any of the AJAX calls, or like let's say HTTP service. Then we are actually using the NGRX, where we are putting entire logic to call the service or what to do depending on action.
You're doing a what?
I'm saying like we use the NGRX, and in the effect, then we are putting every entire logic to call that particular service, or if the service fails, if service successful, or what common things you require for that service. So that we are using in effect. And in component, again, then there is little bit business logic, or as you mentioned, it is a more the presentation logic. I mean to say the objects on which the HTML gets rendered, right? So when you say actually sandbox services or component services, do you mean the granular level components only, or you are suggesting that we put the business logic also in one of the service.ts file?
For the full monorep architecture, I recommend putting the service, the business logic inside of the sandbox, and then the effects and stuff will go down here. So you will have some sandbox will be mostly delegating to the state management and the HTTP, but if there were some other business rules that need to be applied, then you will also do them here in the sandbox. And then when I talked about the component services, so when you don't have this, then you can, because we want our components to be as small as possible. That's one thing we want. And you can see this here. I actually, before I did this whole monorep architecture here, I actually had a component service here to absorb some of the complexity here. But now instead, I just use the sandbox. So for the most part, you will just use the sandbox here. But if you don't have this monorep architecture, if you don't have the sandbox, then you will just start offloading some of the component logic over to services, because services are just pure classes. They are easier to test, and they create for a UI, a business logic, a separation. And that's one of the key principles of clean architecture that we want. But if you have this in place, you have the sandboxes, just move all the logic calls, just strip down the components to basically nothing, so they just delegate to the sandboxes, and then let the sandboxes handle all the complexity. And then inside of the sandbox, you can just trigger the effects, and you can get the selectors here, and yeah, do trigger the reducers and such.
Okay. Yeah, but like Christian, let's say if depending on the objects, right, data objects, suppose we need to manipulate certain UI fields, like let's say you have two fields A and B, okay, and based on these two fields, your one of the editable field will decide whether it is, I mean, we can decide whether it is editable or not editable. So that logic where you suggest to put in the service or in the presentation component.
So you have some logic inside of here. So let's say you have a component here.
Yeah.
And then when what you say, what should that call?
Say decide editability.
Decide editability, and then it calls. So where does it get does it need to get that from some state somewhere?
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
State actually will call the service actual, and then when we load the state, based on that state's two fields, right? Let's say state is market data. It has two fields, let's say offer and bid. So based on that, like that.
Okay, so what you could do is that you could then, to get the editability state, you will call the sandbox method here, and then that method could return some callback. That is, it could just return some other observable that you can then subscribe to, and then you could get the result from that. And if you need to do some more business logic, you just call another sandbox method.
Okay. So that means you still want to put that in service and not in the presentation component, right?
If you have sandboxes in place, you use the sandboxes. If you don't have sandboxes, if you haven't set up this full monoweb architecture, then when you just start offloading logic and you just start making the components more slim, more dumb, and offloading logic to services, that can be the first step. If you don't have all this in place, let's say we have a 5-year-old Angular architecture, right, that it's a lot of work to get all of this running here. It might take you just weeks of just maybe setting features on hold because it's just breaking all the time because you're moving around all these files, or you need to schedule it for some vacation time to do all of this. It might, for some, it might be hard. So what you can do then, if this is hard to set up for some circumstances, then you can just start offloading logic, creating a service. For example, here it could be add to do.service, offloading the logic to the service, and then later that logic will go to the sandbox once you have the whole architecture in place. But if you have a whole architecture, you already have sandboxes for the feature, just move it to sandbox. All right?
Okay. All right. Got it.
Yep.
Thanks.
No problem. So do we have any more questions here? I don't think so. All right. If you have any other questions, you can just ask them in the Slack workspace. And if you haven't done all the action items yet, just make sure that you get them done, because in the next weeks and weeks to follow, we're just going to keep building on this, just going to keep building each block at a time to make our architecture, to make our processes, and to make the way we work better and better. So make sure you do everything, and the more you share in the different Slack channels, the more help you can get. So just make sure you do that to get the most out of the seminar. All right, and that sums up this Q&A session. Since we don't have any, we have one more question, it seems like. Yeah, I'll just unmute Kevin. Hey, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so like the util shared libraries, that's really just basically services, right? You're just making access to pulling the logic out, correct?
It's not actually services. It can be services, but it could also just be exported functions. So for example, it could be like a date helper and such, just some function. But it could also be a service if you need to hook it into, if it has it could be services, but that's only makes sense if it injects other util services, because remember how the dependency chains goes. Utils are at the end of the dependency chains. Utils can only depend on other utils. So that means you use a service because you need the IOC to import, to inject the dependencies. But you can only inject utils. So for the most part, you will only do export functions here. for the most part. It could be that you have some utils that you want to use together, and then it makes sense to create them as services so you can use them with Angular IOC for dependency injection. But yeah, otherwise than that, it's not really necessary to do that. You can also just start with just having exported functions and then convert them to services later if you need a service for. Yes, it should only be for the injection reason. That's the only reason you should need a service.
Okay. And then in the shared, also on the shared libraries, how do you, like each application will use it? Is the compiler smart enough to only load it once when you're compiling everything together?
When this compiles, so it actually doesn't matter what belongs in the code base. The thing libraries is doing, it's only for these novel TSLint rules. It's not doing any magical to the actual bundling. So how Angular CLI works, Angular CLI uses Webpack. Webpack is going through all these ESX imports, and it's just resolving them, and then it's bundling them according to the Webpack config. So actually this has nothing to do with the libraries. It's nothing to do with how the different but if you use the NX monorep or not, what it will do is it will just import, put the library inside of the bundle. So actually this will go for normal Angular CLI configuration, the library will go into the main bundle, or it will go into the feature bundles for if you have lazy loaded feature modules, which you also should have. So there's nothing magical stuff going here. It will just be imported in the module that imports it. So this is not like creating some lazy loaded chunk. Like for example, later we're gonna look at Angular elements, how we can create like a chunk that can be used. The only way you can with this architecture here, if you want your own chunk of JavaScript, is by creating a new app project here. Creating a new app project that will generate a new folder inside of this folder of JavaScript bundles. So yeah, that's how it works.
Okay. All right, thank you.
No problem. So any more questions? I will close the Q&A session soon.
I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Well, yeah, that's it for this Q&A session then. Then I'll just see you in Slack, and then next week the lessons we'll be looking into processes and how to actually, now one thing is to look at how to structure the code here, but that's actually the easy part of having a monorep architecture. That's super easy. We're just organizing folders here. It couldn't be more easy. And then of course we have something here that is gonna enforce some doing some automation around the folder structure and dependencies, which is also nice. But the hard part is going to be in making this work with a DevOps pipeline that should be able to deploy continuously and should be able to easily make changes without it breaking it all. So I'm going to show you how to do that, showing you a full pipeline for how to actually use all of this, and then how to align your processes in your team for continuous delivery. So I'm really looking forward to share that with you for next time. Otherwise than that, just make sure that you finish up this week's action items and watch all the videos in full. All right, so see you next time. Bye bye.